John Beaufort, Confederate Gold. Chapter 3, A Startling Discovery by John Jennett. The morning sun slanted through the kitchen window, turning the steam from Christy's coffee into ghostly ribbons. She sat at the table in her robe, watching John fuss with his notebook again. He'd been at it since dawn, muttering measurements, drawing arrows, circling the pond and the barn with military precision. Finally, he looked up, eyes sharper than she'd seen in years. "Christy," he said, voice calm but alive with purpose. "I've been thinking. We should get a metal detector. Nothing fancy, just enough to rule places out. If there's really something here, that'll prove it. If not, well, then we can all stop chasing shadows." Christy studied him over the rim of her cup. He sounded so reasonable, so measured. But she saw the restless energy in the way his fingers tapped the table, the way his gaze flicked toward the window as if the earth outside was already whispering to him. "And by we," she said carefully, "you mean you and the boys?" He shook his head quickly. "No, us, together. Look, I know last night sounded crazy. I know. But if you're with me, if you see what I see out there, then it's not just in my head. You'll know, Christy. You'll feel it." Something in his voice pulled at her, pleading, almost boyish. The soldier who had always been so self-contained now needed her belief to steady him. She set her cup down, folded her hands around it to buy a little time. "And if we find nothing?" she asked. His mouth twitched, a ghost of a smile. "Then we laugh about it and dig a hole for tomatoes instead." Christy wanted to laugh with him, but the knot in her stomach only tightened. She thought of Dakota, already bragging about being Dad's scout. She thought of Stephen, warning her with that low, worried voice. But she also thought of John's face when he told her about the visions, the fire in his eyes, the certainty. She realized he wasn't going to let this go. At least if she was beside him, she could keep it from spinning too far. She sighed. "All right," she said softly. "Get your metal detector." His grin broke wide, almost boyish. He leaned over and kissed her forehead. "You won't regret this." As he pulled back, Christy stared down into her cooling coffee. She already did. By Saturday morning, the detector had arrived, an Amazon box already broken down and tucked by the recycling bin, as if John couldn't stand to leave the evidence lying around. Christy stood on the back porch, coffee in hand, watching as he swept the fresh, gleaming device back and forth like a rifle on patrol. Dakota trotted behind him, clutching the spare batteries like precious ammunition. Stephen trailed last, hands shoved in his hoodie, his long legs making him look even more reluctant. "Listen close, boys," John said, his voice pitched low and steady, the way he used to brief his men. "One tone means junk, old nails, wire, bottle caps. 2 tones in quick succession. That's what we're looking for. Anything deeper, anything that sounds solid, you mark it. Got it?" "Yes, sir," Dakota barked, grinning wide. Stephen rolled his eyes. "Dad, it's not basic training." But John didn't rise to the bait. His focus was absolute. He swept the coil across the ground with smooth arcs, spacing his steps in neat rhythm. Christy noticed, of course she noticed, that he was gridding the property, one invisible square at a time. Recon, just like overseas. Taylor padded ahead of them, nose in the wind, while Emma stuck close to Christy, her massive white flank brushing against her leg. The detector chirped faintly, a small electronic burble. John froze. Dakota gasped, wide-eyed. Stephen muttered, "It's probably an old fence staple." John crouched, flicking open his folding spade. With brisk precision, he cut a plug of sod and turned it over. Christy leaned in just enough to see. A rusty nail bent nearly in half. "See?" Stephen said flatly. John only smiled, tossed the nail aside, and pressed on. They worked the pasture, the edges of the barn, the long slope down toward the pond. Dakota's energy never dimmed. Every beat made him bounce on his toes. Stephen grew more restless, scuffing at the dirt, watching his brother like he wanted to protect him from disappointment. And Christy? She watched John, the way his eyes flicked constantly, scanning the terrain, the way he muttered coordinates under his breath, the way his hands sometimes clenched tight on the detector's shaft, knuckles whitening as if he were holding on to more than just a tool. Then near the pond, The detector sang out again, a deeper, stronger tone that carried. John stiffened, shoulders locking. Dakota bolted forward, nearly tripping over himself. "Dad! That's it, isn't it?" John didn't answer right away. He crouched, pressing his palm against the earth, as if the vibrations were still there, humming beneath his skin. His eyes burned with something Christy recognized: certainty, obsession, maybe even faith. She felt a chill despite the warm morning sun. John set the detector aside and took up his spade. The earth here was damp and dark, the kind that gave easily under steel. He cut into the soil in steady slices, lifting clumps onto the grass. Dakota knelt beside him, practically vibrating. "What is it? What is it?" "Easy, son," John murmured. His tone was calm, but Christy saw the tightness in his jaw. Stephen lingered a few feet back, arms folded. "It's going to be another nail." A few more scoops, and then John's spade hit something with a faint metallic clink. Dakota gasped. "That's it!" John dropped to his knees, pulling dirt away with his bare hands. From the hole, he lifted a rounded piece of rusted iron. He brushed it with his thumb, and the shape resolved, a horseshoe, pitted but still whole. Dakota whooped, bouncing to his feet. "See? See? I told you this place is special." Stephen gave a long, skeptical sigh. "People had horses here for like 100 years, Dakota. Doesn't mean there's a treasure chest." But John wasn't listening to either of them. He turned the horseshoe over slowly in his hand, dirt crumbling off the iron. His eyes were fixed on it the way a man might study a relic at a battlefield memorial, reverent, hungry. He set it carefully aside and dug again. Within minutes, his fingers closed on something small and hard. He held it up to the light, a lead musket ball, gray and scarred, heavy for its size. Christy's breath caught. Even Stephen leaned closer now. John's voice was low, almost a whisper. "Enfield, 58 caliber, Civil War issue." The boys stared at him. Christy stared at him. He looked like he was half here, half back in another century. Dakota grinned. "That means the soldiers were here, right?" John only nodded, brushing more dirt from his hands, his eyes never leaving the little sphere of lead. Christy felt Emma press against her leg again, the dog leaning into her like she knew something was wrong. She curled her hand in the Pyrenees' thick white fur and kept her gaze on John, the way his breathing had quickened, the way the fire in his eyes seemed to flare hotter with every relic the ground gave up. This wasn't just about history anymore. The land was answering him, and Christy realized, with a sharp pang, that she might already be too late to stop him. The table was loud, alive with the boys' voices. Dakota was reenacting the discovery like a campfire storyteller, hands flapping as he described the ping of the detector and the clink of the shovel. Stephen rolled his eyes at the exaggerations, but couldn't quite keep the grin off his face as he teased his brother. "Pretty sure Dad just dug up a piece of junk metal, and Dakota's acting like it's Fort Knox." "It was a bullet," Dakota shot back, his voice cracking with excitement. "A real Civil War bullet. That means the soldiers were here, Stephen." Christy sat between them, smiling faintly at their energy, but her eyes kept sliding to the far end of the table. John hadn't touched his food. His fork lay forgotten at the edge of his plate, his hand resting idle beside it. His gaze was locked on nothing in particular. Maybe the window, maybe the barn beyond. But his jaw worked like he was chewing something harder than steak, something bitter. Dakota noticed too. "Dad, tell Stephen it was real. Tell him it's proof." John blinked, pulled back into the room. He looked at his sons, his expression softening a fraction. "It's real," he said simply. Dakota beamed, vindicated. Stephen frowned, thoughtful. Christy, though, didn't miss the rest of it, the way John's knuckles were pale from how hard his hand had curled into a fist on the table, the way his plate sat untouched, the way his eyes carried that same far-off gleam, like he was still kneeling in the dirt, staring at the musket ball in his palm. The boys filled the silence with chatter, bouncing theories off each other, what else they might find, how deep the chest might be, whether gold coins would still shine after 150 years underground. Christy let them talk, let them glow in their father's shadow, But inside, she felt something sharp twist tighter. The boy saw adventure. John saw destiny. And she saw a man slipping further into a place where she couldn't quite follow. When she finally rose to clear the plates, she caught John's eyes again. For a heartbeat, she swore she didn't see her husband at all. She saw the soldier. The kitchen had gone quiet again. The boys had scattered upstairs, Dakota still talking a mile a minute as Stephen tried to get him to settle down. John had retreated to the barn. No surprise there. Christy stood at the sink, rinsing plates one by one, the warm water fogging the window in front of her. She moved automatically, the rhythm of scrape, rinse, stack, soothing in its own way. But her mind was restless. She could still hear Dakota's eager voice, his excitement bubbling like a spring. She could still see Stephen's wary frown, the way he studied his father when he thought no one was watching. And she could still feel John's silence, the heavy inward kind that had nothing to do with being tired. He hadn't been at that table with them. Not really. He'd been outside, crouched in the dirt, eyes fixed on something only he could see. Christy set a plate in the rack, a little too hard. Porcelain clinked sharply against porcelain. She froze, breath catching. She knew this version of John, the man wound tight, driven by something invisible but immovable. She'd seen it during deployments, the way he lived by routine and mission. She'd loved him for it once, the steadiness, the discipline. But that same edge in peacetime was different, dangerous. And now the boys were caught in it. Dakota thrilled to follow in his father's steps, Stephen already torn between loyalty and doubt. Christy wiped her hands on a dish towel and leaned against the counter. For a long moment she stared out the window toward the barn, where a thin light glowed under the door. She imagined John inside, poring over maps and relics like a general plotting his next move. A chest of gold, soldiers whispering from the grave. She closed her eyes. Part of her wanted to storm out there and put a stop to it, tell him enough was enough, that the farm didn't need to become a battlefield. But another part of her, a quieter, more dangerous part, wondered what he might find if she didn't stop him. What if the visions were real? Christy pressed the towel flat on the counter, her hands shaking just slightly. If John kept digging, he might tear their family apart. But if she pulled him back too soon, she might never know what lay beneath their land, what had been calling to him, maybe even to her. And that thought, more than anything, made her afraid. The following Saturday, John was restless before the sun cleared the treetops. By the time Christy and the boys came outside, he already had the metal detector in hand, fresh batteries loaded, and 2 shovels leaning against the barn wall. "Same plan as last time?" Stephen asked, voice flat. John shook his head. "No, we push farther back, past the tree line." Dakota nearly bounced on his toes. "Yes, deeper search." Christy followed silently, Emma at her heel. She kept her arms wrapped around herself against the cool air, but it wasn't the cold that made her shiver. They worked in steady sweeps across the sloping ground beyond the pond. Birds stirred in the branches overhead, and the detector's steady hum filled the pauses between their footsteps. The first beeps gave them another scattering of nails and scrap. Stephen grumbled. Dakota pocketed them anyway. John pressed them forward. It was near a shallow rise where the real hit came, a sharp, insistent tone that spiked again and again. John dropped to his knees, motioning for the boys to hold back. He dug fast, dirt flying behind him, his breath coming hard. The spade struck something solid with a dull clink. "Careful," John muttered, his fingers clawed into the soil. Then they brushed against something pale. Christy felt her stomach flip. She grabbed Dakota's shoulder before he could lunge forward. "Stay back." John worked gently now, brushing earth away until the shape revealed itself. A rib cage, thin, fragile, curled inward as if trying to shield itself. Beside it, the remnants of a gray wool sleeve, frayed and eaten away. A rusted musket barrel jutted from the ground like a broken finger. Dakota gasped. Stephen swore under his breath. "God Almighty," Christy whispered. And then John froze. His hands still resting on the fragile bones, his eyes went wide and glassy. The world shifted. He wasn't in the woods anymore. He was there. Tommy lay against the very same slope, his young body racked with coughing fits. Blood streaked his lips, staining the rag he clutched in his shaking hand. His skin was clammy, eyes glazed with fever and fear. I can't, Tommy rasped. I can't go no farther. Eli knelt beside him, desperate but hard. You hush now, Tommy. Just a little more. We hide the chest, then you can rest. Tommy shook his head weakly. His musket slipped from his fingers, landing in the grass. Ain't gonna make it. Y'all go on without me. Jacob stood a few feet away, scowling, his voice sharp to cover the crack in it. We can't leave him. Damn it, Eli. But Carter only closed his eyes and murmured low, words blurred like a prayer. Boys killing boys. Same as it ever was. Tommy coughed again, harder this time, his body arching with the force of it. Then he went still. His hands slid from the rag, falling limp into the dirt. The others stood silent over him. Finally, Eli reached down, tugged Tommy's coat closed, and whispered, Rest easy, son. John snapped back with a sharp gasp, his hand still on the boy's real bones. The vision's echo rang in his ears. Behind him, Dakota whispered, Dad? You okay? Stephen was pale, jaw tight. We shouldn't be here. Christy's voice was low, trembling but firm. John, this has gone far enough. But John only stared down at the remains, his voice breaking as he whispered the name he had no business knowing. Tommy. This is the end of Chapter 3. If you like this story, please like, share, and subscribe to be sure not to miss the next chapter.